Welcome everybody to today's live Q&A at Parenting Academy. Last week we talked about a topic that led to a lot of questions after the fact, and we had a lot to unpack, so we decided to do it again today. Today we're going to talk about ending the tantrums, how to teach your child to accept no and stay calm. What we're going to walk through is the strategies that you as a parent can learn to make sure that you know what to do and how to respond when your child gets upset because you tell them that they can't have something that they want. So, if you feel like if you say no to your child, they will completely lose it, and you may even be afraid of using the word no, you're definitely not alone. It's hard and it's nerve wracking when you know the consequences of telling your child no. However, it's important to know that your behavior plays a significant role in your child's behavior. What that means is that your actions either fuel or calm theirs. So, avoiding no only makes it harder for you and your child in the long run. So, I want to tell you a story on this. I previously had a client who would absolutely not tolerate being told no. Telling him no would lead to aggression, property destruction, self injurious behavior, and the mom naturally felt afraid. However, after working with the family, we realized that that fear the mom had was fueling that child's overpowering behavior. The more afraid she acted, the more hesitant or insecure she was, the more aggressive he became. So instead, we taught the mom how to be assertive in those moments and how to stop fearing saying no. After some time and work, she was able to build the confidence necessary to deny access to multiple things and handle those reactions to the point that they became basically non existent. She could say no and they could move on to the next thing. And it was night and day, the difference. And so this goes to show you that with the right tools, you can actually help your child build that tolerance and reduce those behaviors over time. Now, if you are a parent who feels guilty, or you may say that your child's disability is the reason why they can't handle being told no. I get it and I hear you. But also, let me share something that may change your perspective. Even though some things are harder for your child because of their disability does not define their ability. And allowing access to everything creates unrealistic expectations simply because that is not how the world works. No matter how great the environments are that your child is in, there will always be things that are out of your control or out of their control that we have to prepare them for. And the way that we prepare them for those situations is by giving them the foundational skills that they need to navigate those situations. Tolerating disappointment and being able to handle those like big feelings is one of those foundational skills. I'll give you another example of this. I used to work with a client who the mom was not only afraid, but she also felt super guilty saying no. She felt like her child was already suffering enough with their disability, so she didn't feel like adding to their disappointments. Whatever the kid wanted, it was just easier to give it to them than to deal with the behavior. And then the 2020 pandemic hit. And there was nothing the mom could do to make things appear that they were simply not available, like amusement parks, certain stores, certain activities. So naturally, it was very disappointing to the child. And it was also unexpected because she had not been taught any of the skills necessary to handle those emotions. So we got to work. And after some time, the child began understanding and not getting upset. The mom was able to realize how important those life skills are. And most importantly, in my opinion, mom could see that she could teach the child and that the child could learn. So, this goes to show again that with the right tools, you can help your child cope with those disappointments and you can feel certain that you know what to do. Now, I always say that it's important to understand the behavior before we go into intervention. We need to understand the why and the reason behind the behavior so that we know how to better handle it. Now, we're going to look at the three main reasons why children with developmental disabilities have a hard time tolerating being told no. And then we'll talk about how to help them in those situations. Reason number one is that they don't understand yet that no does not mean never. Reason number two is that they have learned that big reactions sometimes change the outcome. And reason number three is that they don't yet have the coping skills to handle disappointment. We're going to go into each one of them. Reason number one, they don't understand no doesn't mean never. So, for example, if your child asks you for a cookie and you tell them that they can't have a cookie, they immediately scream, throw, or go into meltdown mode. Why? Because for them, that no, that denial feels final and scary. They may think that they'll never see a cookie ever again. And what we want to do in those situations is start teaching with low stakes. So, for example, try telling your child that they can have something that is not super highly preferred to them. So instead of saying no to their cookie, say no to something like fruit snacks or something that they don't love that much that they will be highly disappointed for. This way, you can start praising them for tolerating those no's in low stakes. Another thing that you can do for those situations is use different language. So instead of saying no, you can say, not right now, but you can have it after lunch. Or say, yes, you can have cookie, but first lunch, then cookie. So you're teaching or bridging the gap between no to yes. Like no doesn't mean never. No could mean not right now. No could mean no, but after lunch or at a certain time. And that's how you can start bridging that gap. Reason number two is that big reactions have worked in the past, right? So if your child has ever asked you for something and you said no, and then to get them to stop behaving the way they were, you gave in. You accidentally taught them that big reactions changes your mind. Why? Because are learned through our consequences. So if a meltdown has led to getting what they wanted, even once, they learn to repeat that behavior in the future. So for this, the strategy is to be consistent. If you say no, make sure that you stick with it. Also, you can practice tolerance in small doses and then build up. So, what this looks like is if your child asks for a cookie, you can say, not right now, wait 1 second, and then give it to them. So, basically, you are reinforcing the right behavior. You said no, and they tolerated it, even if it was because you gave them a second before you gave the cookie. What this does is that this reinforces the right behavior. So over time, you're able to increase that time in between you saying no and you actually giving them what they want. So that's how we practice building that tolerance in small doses. Just go small in that duration. And reason number three is that they don't have the emotional tools to handle disappointment. Being told no is frustrating and it's disappointing, and they don't have the skills to manage those big emotions or big feelings. So after hearing no, they just immediately shut down or they lash out. Why is that? Because they don't have the self regulation skills to process that disappointment internally, properly, or safely. So, in those situations, what we can do is acknowledge their feelings and be present. Your job in that moment is to not to end the behavior. We don't want to just be like stop tantruming or stop feeling the way you are. Our job is to create this space for it. We want that feeling to feel safe to be felt. So, what we can say in those moments is, I understand that is disappointing. You really wanted that cookie. It's okay to feel disappointing. You still can't have it. You're still going to hold the boundary, but you're creating that space for those big feelings to be felt and to be okay to be felt. When we go immediately into trying to end the behavior because of how the child feels, the child learns the opposite. The child learns that that feeling is not normal and it is not appropriate for them to feel that way when it is. So we want to teach them that. So now that we understand the three main reasons why children do not tolerate being told no, we're going to go over some top mistakes to avoid. Mistake number one is saying no in high stake moments. Denying access to something that is really highly preferable to your child without properly prepare them for it, that can cause an immediate escalation. So instead, you want to prepare them ahead of time. For example, you can say something like, hey, remember, if you don't finish your homework, you can't have your iPad later. Set your expectations earlier so that they don't show up unexpectedly for your child. Remember, you can have a cookie if you eat your lunch first. So remind them of what the expectation is prior to you actually going into it. Mistake number two is inconsistent follow through. Remember that saying no and then giving in teaches that persistent or escalation gets results. So they learn to do it more in the future. Stick with your first answer. If there's a chance that you're going to say yes, don't say no in the first place. If you're going to give in to what they ask, you might as well give in without dealing with the behavior. Just say yes in the first place. And that way, we're not teaching them that behaviors and escalations lead to you changing your mind. Then, mistake number three is overusing the word no without the teaching portion. We continuously say no without teaching that tolerance for that no word. So if no is used too frequently, they kind of learn to tune it out and to be meaningless or to be overwhelming. Instead, what you can do is to only use no when it's absolutely necessary, and make sure that you are pairing it with like teaching what no means, reinforcement for tolerating no appropriately, and emotional support for handling that disappointment. Instead of using no, like I mentioned earlier, you can say things like, not right now, but here is when, or yes, you can have it, but first, this needs to happen before you can have that. And then again, just use no when it's absolutely necessary. So, just a quick recap of what I went over today. Teaching no is about building the tolerance to that denial and that emotional regulation. So, tolerance for the disappointment, for hearing no, for being frustrated. Kids resist no or being told no for three reasons: because they misunderstand what it means, because they have learned to negotiate with you, or because they lack the coping skills to manage those emotions. So, to help with those three things, what we can do instead is teach in low stakes situations, use different language, be consistent with the follow through, provide reinforcement for the right behavior, and model self regulation strategies. I hope this clarifies some of the questions that we got last time, but I want to open up for questions. Alec, if there are any, you can send them my way.
Yeah, there's one that came in the chat regarding about you mentioned there's skills required to handle not receiving something or saying no to your child. Do you know what skills those are, and like what is there a way to go about teaching them those?
Yeah, definitely. So the skills that we want to see in the child is being able to manage that emotion. So the emotion of disappointment, of frustration when something doesn't go their way, and also that is the main skill that we are looking for, and also just really understanding the concept of no. What does no mean? Does it mean not right now? Does it mean later? Does it mean what are the other options and things that are true when I'm being told no? So those are the skills that we want to see in the child. If we go a little bit deeper or more nuance in it, we also want to see, for example, if you say no to a cookie, will they accept an alternative snack? Like that is also a skill, being able to accept an alternative. So I would say those three skills are what we are looking for.
We got another question asking what your advice is if their spouse isn't on the same page when using these strategies with their kid.
So I definitely would recommend having a conversation with your spouse and make sure that they understand the reason behind those strategies. Maybe you can even invite them to join one of those calls with us, because it's important for us adults to understand the reason why in order for us to change our behavior. Part of this process for you as a parent, in which you are learning how to basically parent differently for your child with developmental disabilities, is breaking your own habits and your own behaviors. And that comes from you understanding your own beliefs, your own like instincts, and being able to break those. So a lot of the times what I see with parents who are not on the same page is that they have different ideas and different thoughts and different beliefs. And oftentimes when we are able to give them a different perspective, they are on board. So I would recommend, again, first sitting down with your partner and kind of like talk about it. And if that doesn't necessarily work, you can always implement the strategies yourself. Start with yourself. You will see the results. And so, what you can do is show your partner by modeling the behavior. So, instead of asking your partner, which oftentimes can be hard, to be like, hey, do this, um, you can start showing them how it works for you and how you start making progress with your child, and then potentially they will follow.
I have another question. It seems like the parent has a child that's nonverbal and has limited communication. She was saying that she believes that her child just does it to purposely push her buttons, but how are you able to tell the reason why the behavior is happening?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. um I always go by, I guess, by this saying, I always assume competence. I always assume that the child is the reason why they are not behaving in the way that we want them to behave is not because they are purposefully being defiant or purposefully pushing our buttons. There is likely something that they don't understand that we can fill in the gap for. And the way you go about understanding why that behavior happens in the first place is by observation. So I would really recommend that you keep like a little notebook, a little note section where you write down what happens before you tell them no, what happens after, and then with a little bit of continuity on those observations, we're able to look back and see, okay, when this happened, when that happened, and then we're able to identify patterns. Once we're able to identify patterns, that is usually what tells us why the reason of the behavior is, or at least a very close approximation to it.
I have a parent asking, she knows that being consistent on what you say is very important. Do you have any suggestions for the times that you might accidentally slip on being firm on that boundary and what to do about it?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I get that question a lot. I want to acknowledge that I know you're not going to be 100% perfect, although consistency is important, it's not going to happen. Go by the 80-20 rule. If you're 80% consistent and 20% you're not, you're probably not going to make a significant, like, detriment to your child. So don't try to be 100% perfect. 80-20 rule. However, what to do when you slip? So if you do slip and you notice that, the first thing I recommend is that if you're going to give in quick. Again, the reason for that is because we are accidentally teaching the child that they need to escalate for us to change our mind. So if you're going to change your mind and you feel like you don't have the mental bandwidth, the emotional bandwidth to deal with that, and you feel like I just can't, just give in right away. The less that we get in intensity into the behavior, the better it is. And then once you have, say you slipped, the other scenario would be to how to hold the boundary after maybe you made a mistake or you feel like you slipped. Um, Make sure that you are able to go to basically the third strategy I talked about of being able to hold that space for that emotion to happen for your child. We don't want to go immediately into trying to turn off the behavior because we don't want to teach them that that feeling is not appropriate to have, because it is. Being told no and not getting what you want is frustrating and is disappointing, and it's okay to feel that way. So make sure that you have what you need as a parent to be able to hold that space. Whether it is you take a second to take a deep breath, you say maybe potential some mantras in your head of like, I am calm, I can handle this, something like that that prepares you to be able to handle that emotional reaction for your child is what I would recommend.
We have another question. It says, I worry that if I say no too often, I'll damage our relationship. How do I balance boundaries with connection?
That is a great question, also. Thank you for asking that, because I do think that a lot of parents feel that, creating those disappointing moments can really damage their relationship with your child. But kind of like going back to the idea of being able to teach your child how to handle disappointment and how to tolerate those frustrations is really a foundational skill in the long run. um, the more that you actually practice how to tell them no with the appropriate strategies, with having those teaching moments and really creating this space for them to feel these feelings, it's actually part of the process of building connection with your child. It sounds kind of counterproductive because you are in a way creating those moments, but also you are setting them up for how to listen to those boundaries, how to follow expectations, which for a child, they actually look for. They look for that leadership, they look for that guidance. It's kind of like if you have ever gone to work and you really appreciate a boss that really gives you clear direction, that they really set boundaries and expectations for you to like succeed, and you feel really connected to that boss because you can trust them, versus the opposite, right? A boss who doesn't feel like they are certain, or like you can't really follow them. It just creates that uncertainty in you. It's the same for your child. You are that guidance for them. So even though you are creating those negative emotions, that doesn't mean that you're not building connection simultaneously.
We have another one asking, basically the mom saying like she's tried ignoring the behaviors in the past and it's gone on for like hours. Do you have any suggestion on how to handle that? Because eventually, um, either her or her husband will end up giving in because of the duration of the behavior.
Yeah, I definitely would not recommend ignoring the behavior, because multiple reasons. Ignoring only works when you understand why the behavior happens in the first place. Largely, when a kid is being told no and they engage in a behavior, they are not engaging in that because they want attention. We only typically like ignore and not fully when a behavior is for an attention port reason. And so, none of being tolerating being told no is about attention. It's about emotional dysregulation, is about their inability to understand the concept, is about like their past history of learned behavior. So ignoring is probably not going to work in that situation, which is why you are seeing that really significant duration. I would recommend that um, you engage in those like calming strategies and that you acknowledge the feeling. I hear you, I understand you're disappointed, and it's okay to be disappointed, and then offer whatever calming strategies may work for your child, whether it's a hug, deep breathing, deep pressure, offer alternatives. But I would recommend to not fully ignoring them.
And then we have another one that says, I give them choices, but they still say no. Going back to your strategy on like giving them what would be like the next step in that situation?
So giving them an alternative like toys when they ask for something and you told them no is only going to work if the toy itself or the alternative that you have is equally preferable to them. So for example, say you go to a restaurant and you want pepperoni pizza and they don't have pepperoni pizza and you don't like buffalo sauce. And the alternative that they give you is like buffalo chicken pizza. You're going to be like, well, no, this doesn't work for me. However, if they gave you an alternative of like Hawaiian pizza, which is kind of like similar, it has some like deli meat, you're like, okay, well, I'm okay with that. You have to the reason why the alternative is not working for you is because that alternative is not the right alternative for your child. So what you want to do is look for something that is similar to the thing that they asked or is even more likable for your child than the thing that they asked, and then it will work.
Cool. I think that's all the questions we got here. I'm scrolling through to see if there's anything else that come up.
Okay, awesome. I don't see any on my end, so I think that we can end here and we'll see you guys next week.